all enjoying a terrific holiday season. It's championship game week. Rutgers ends its regular season at 7-5, awaiting the bowl bids that will start rolling in next week. And even though it's quiet time on the field for many teams, this is it's become like a fascinating time of the year. And when it first started to happen, when we're talking about the transfer portal, how is this going to shake out? And it was just total chaos. The number of guys that hit the portal the first 2 to 3 days and trying to follow everybody. Do we have a shot at this guy, shot at that guy? Who are we looking at? That starts on Monday. And this is going to be an important portal season. We lose Joe Harasymiak. Overall, really good for the Rutgers defense. Kind of stepped back a little bit this year. Yes, we had a lot of injuries. He tightened things up against Minnesota and Maryland. Did a good job that way. And Michigan State. He moves on to UMass, and a little bit of a surprise. Who are we going to go after? Is our defense going to take a big step back? Remember last year we talked about how this team is going to take the next step. People were talking about 9-3, 10-2. Some prognosticators were even guessing could Rutgers go 12-0. With a lot of returning seniors, especially on defense. But now that we're losing all those guys, we're under pressure. Will our defense take a big step back next year? The signing day was pretty good for Rutgers, top 30 class by many accounts. And the thing that was interesting about Coach's signing class press conference, he gives a lot of things away in his body language. How he projects, how he comes across, and he looked really calm, really content. He looked kind of happy. And when he looks relaxed and content, I feel confident in that he feels that whatever issues they have are manageable or it's a good day. And he definitely looked like he was happy. You know, it's a good class. But Coach isn't, sunshine and rainbows kind of guy. And when there's things to really worry about, he's not necessarily going to express them, but he's going to look a little agitated. He looked totally content and kind of happy, actually, about this signing class. We'll see where that all lands. Next year, we know, tougher schedule. Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Oregon. Going to be a tough road to hoe. And, getting through the Big Ten schedule, there's probably going to be a couple losses in there against peer teams that we probably could or should win. And then here's the other thing to think about. And even though we, on paper, have a really good recruiting class, the results might not be as good next year. In our out-of-conference games, Ohio, who's 9-3, and Miami of Ohio, 8-4. Are you kidding me? We get away from the Wagners of the world, and now we got MAC Conference Championship game participants. So next year is not going to be easy. You heard it here first. Don't be shocked if we're a 6-6 kind of team, and we're kind of middling, and we have some losses in there that you might not have expected, in addition to losses to the big guys. Nonetheless, you never know how things are going to shake out. Did anybody have Michigan as a 3-touchdown underdog beating Ohio State? No, they did it. Michigan's still a name brand. They wound up having I think a top 5 recruiting class. I don't know how that happens when on a down year, but I guess when you're Michigan, you have that advantage. So going forward, what's the defense? I'm not going to break down the incoming class. We talked about the recruiting class as they committed during the summer. And Rich and Mike from the Night Report did a really good job going through all the different recruits that signed. I'm just going to give a 30,000-foot overview of where we stand, what it could look like. What the defense is going to look like without Joe Harasymiak. This was a really experienced defense, But now we need defensive end, we need safety, we need a corner. Salam did, Salam made some plays. He did pretty well, against Michigan State, but he also had, some moments where he could have been a little better. Bo Mascow, I think one day will be pretty good. Right now, is still early in the process. We have, we're losing Shaquan Moyle, Desmond Igmanosin, Flip Dixon. Will Wesley Bentley stay around? Mo Toure, there's some question marks. Malcolm Ray, I have to say a little bit disappointment. I thought he'd have a little more productivity. Troy Rainey's moving on. So we're going to have a lot of holes on defense. And we've talked about in the past what hurt us down the stretch in past seasons. We get through our first 3-4 games and we get to the Big Ten schedules, the injuries start piling up, and then you fade down the stretch. And it was because of depth, specifically like offensive line depth. And going into the season, we thought that we did a good job building a Big Ten type team from size and depth. And it seemed, despite that 4-game losing streak, seemed to have worked out better for us. We have some depth. You talk about the offensive line. This offensive line has a really high floor. Losing Holland Pierce, we're maybe not going to have a super high ceiling. But nonetheless, if we can, the incoming freshman is going to, as we've talked about in the past, we're having to build depth. Now, going forward, we're going to need young guys to play. We just are now. The coach has said this year we had a lot of young guys play, but, Kosh Sanders was another guy who at times looked pretty damn good. Had some freshman moments. Nonetheless, we're going to have more of that. We're going to have freshmen jump in and play right away. Other programs do it. If we're going to play with the big boys, we can't just be developmental all the time throughout the whole process. Guys are going to have to play, and they're going to have to make plays. And hopefully that's the case with the recruiting class this year, and we'll get to that in a minute. Odds-on favorite for defensive coordinator, the leading candidate in the minds of fans and people who cover the Rutgers program for a living, Corey Heatherman, assistant coach. I should say defensive coordinator at Minnesota. Ex-Rutgers linebacker coach. He was assistant coach of the year at James Madison. Minnesota defensive coordinator. Will we be able to pilfer him again and have to pay him because it's a sideways move? Have to do a 1-year buyout. I think it's $850,000. He seems to be like if we were able to land him, that would be a good get. But some other things, and Minnesota's defense was very good this year. I'm kind of surprised we won by a touchdown, but the fact that we beat Minnesota, being that they want to kind of play the same way we do, close to the vest, run the ball, throw it a bit, play some defense, that was a good job. Nonetheless, Corey Heatherman would be a good get. The other ex-Rutgers guy that I think people was not really in front of their thoughts, and maybe it should be, and that's Joe Harasymiak. I know we just obliterated Michigan State, but he had a pretty good year. The Michigan State, 39th in yards given up, 35th in running yards given up. They were pretty good. They have, well, you want to talk about injuries for Rutgers. Their entire secondary was out. The whole secondary. So obviously their pass defense was not great, and that's where they suffered a little bit. But overall, still, this was a really good defense. Even though they were a little weak in the passing game, I watched several games of Michigan State. They were in the game against top competition. I think I watched the entire, as I've said, the entire Boston College game. They generally started off good. They were very active up front, and then they would give it up in the end. But nonetheless, Joe Rossi, guy to think about. Rebuilding this defense is going to be, this hire is going to be really important. I mean, we're losing Aaron Lewis, Tyree, Robert Longerbeam, I think Eric Rogers. Whereas in the past, getting the quarterback and figuring out how to scheme and run a modern college offense was the challenge. Now it's going to be the defense. Another name that's coming up, and I think also would be a good get, one that people are talking about, is Steve Belichick, defensive coordinator at Washington. Washington had the number 44 defense in the country, so it's not just about him having the right last name. He did a really good job at Washington first year in the Big Ten. Here's one that I kind of like, and it's a head coach. There's a bad head coach. And that's Ryan Walters, former head coach at Purdue. Some guys are just meant to be coordinators. They're not good head coaches. Robert Saleh. You could even say that about Brian Daboll. Some guys are just better at doing a specific task. And Ryan Walters, he was an elite defensive coordinator at Illinois. I think they were top 10, top 12, whatever they were. And when you have a head coach, he now has the gravitas of being a head coach, and he wants to rebuild his resume, redefine his future, get back to doing what he does. He brings that gravitas into a room and give him, look, coaches are always moving around these days anyway. Joe Harasymiak, what was he here, 3 years? So if he got 3 years to rebuild his reputation, his resume, and put together a Rutgers defense that can be really competitive, I think that's a pretty good fit. I'm not sure that a lot of other people have him on their wish list, but Ryan Walters would be I think a kind of a good fit. Has Big Ten experience, ex-head coach. He's got something to prove, and he was good at his job as a coordinator. And along those lines, Aaron Henry, defensive coordinator at Illinois, who he took Ryan Walters' place, he'd be pretty good as well. That's another candidate to think about. He was a quarterback. I don't know if this is good or bad. He was the quarterback coach under Chris Ash. Nonetheless, we won't hold that against him. He did a pretty good job at Illinois. Here's one the guys are talking about, and I'm just not feeling it. NFL coach from Carolina Panthers, that's Tim Lukabu. He was at Boston College with Jeff Hafley. He's currently the Panthers linebacker coach, and I could see us going into the pros to get a position coach and making him a DC. He was the Rutgers outside linebacking coach 2010, 2011, so there's a relationship with Rutgers and Schiano there. Some guys like him. I'm kind of just not feeling it, but I'm not going to dismiss anything. I'll keep an open mind about it. Those are guys with Big Ten ties, maybe some ties to Rutgers, but I'll be open to pursuing other paths. What if we go to a group of five? What if we go to a group of five? Well, like James Madison, Lyle Hemphill at James Madison. They had a top 25 defense. And when you take a guy from a group of five conference, he's going to get a significant pay raise, but you might not have to pay as much as if you pull a guy from a Big Ten program. So going the group of five route might be something to think about. Now, you're probably only going to have him a couple years as he kind of moves up the ladder. They tend to be a little younger. But Lyle Hem, well, James Madison or a Group of 5 team like that might be worth it as well. Nonetheless, no matter who it is that Rutgers go with, young guys are going to have to play, especially on the defensive line. There's no room for for the development program, as Coach likes to say. Yes, you're still going to develop guys. Yes, this recruiting class is top 30. Rivals, I think, has them at 28, whatever it might be. We're going to have to execute on the field, and that's going to mean on defense. Losing a lot of guys as we went through. Guys that might have to play right away. Todd Racung talked about some guys that he thought, some freshmen that he thought would get some playing time. But here's some guys that are probably going to have to contribute right away. Braxton Kyle out of Georgia. Unfortunately, we lose Chase Linton. We kind of discovered him early, and after that, other teams started to pay attention. And when the hometown Georgia comes calling, always in the hunt for a national championship, we lose Chase Linton, but we still have Braxton Kyle, 6'4", 325, Georgia. As it turns out, Chase Linton turned, his stock rose to be a top 100 player, but the word is that Alabama, Georgia were sniffing around Braxton Kyle, and if he's got that kind of skill set, he's going to have to start playing soon. Another guy that might have to contribute early is Robbie Johnson Jr. He's an edge out of Delaware, 6'3", 250. I believe he's the number 1 recruit out of Delaware. Don't quote me on that, but he's a basketball player. He's an athletic kind of guy. So he could contribute. You know how we did, or how well we didn't do in the pass rush and pressure and sacking the quarterback part of the defense this year. He would be an athletic guy that maybe you line up at edge, and he can have some success on the outside. Guy that everybody's excited about. Out of Snyder, in my hometown of Jersey City, where I was born, linebacker DJ McClary, an athletic freak, 6'1", 215. He's a disruptor. He can stop the run. He's athletic, top 200 player. He's the kind of guy with that skill set and that athleticism. He's going to have to contribute right away, and maybe he will, as well as Kamar Archie out of Ewing in the Hunt School. 6'2", 225. Big athletic guy who is also a really good running back. I don't think we're going to see much time with him at running. Watch some film on him at running back. Hey, if you needed a guy to fill in here and there, or maybe run some sort of diversion or trick play, he'd be a guy to think about designing a couple plays for. Nonetheless, DJ McClary, Kamar Archie, going to have to contribute right away. Tariq Hay out of Washington, D.C. He was, I think, the number 2 player out of D.C. We're going to need a corner. He's 4-star, 6'1", 180. But he's not sort of like that lean kind of athletic playmaking kind of guy. He also likes to be physical, mix it up, get in there. So that's a good trait to have. Greg Schiano kind of quarterback. And then also out of Georgia, Michael Clayton. 6'1", 170. He's a track guy. He's probably a guy that you're going to need to develop, but he might get some time on special teams as well. And so the defensive front and the secondary, we're going to have guys are going to have to play right away. I think Richie from the Night Report was talking about Braxton Kyle, and how a guy that size at 325 pounds, watching film on him, how much of a motor he had. A guy that size, just chasing guys down. And when he said, you had a defensive lineman with a motor that size, immediately my thoughts went to Minnesota Vikings Hall of Fame defensive lineman John Randall. I'm not sure that Randall wasn't quite 6'4". He might have been like 6'2". But nonetheless, John Randall, kind of a defensive lineman, would go well in kind of patching up that defensive line. And of course, we're going to have guys in the portal, but getting top edge rushers, getting a left tackle, which we're going to need with Holland Pierce moving on. It's going to cost a lot. So we're probably going to find a guy from the MAC or something like that to be able to fill in holes, both on the offensive line at left tackle or on defense. Nonetheless, some things, on offense, maybe some guys, we're going to lose Daimir. We're going to lose possession receiver Christian Dremel. Coach really happy about the wide receiver class. Jordan Houston, 3-star guy out of Connecticut, he's a deep threat. He can. I'm surprised Daimir wasn't a bigger deep threat. He did have the potential on any play to take the ball deep. Didn't quite get there, but he could be that guy. Maybe he replaces Daimir. Wide receiver Vernon Allen out of Maryland, a new age Rutgers wide receiver, 6'3", 200, Ian Strong, KJ Duff kind of guy. He's one that could see, like Ian Strong, like KJ Duff, see some playing time early. The guy to watch out for is a guy out of Atlantic City. I don't know what people talking about, but Sunday DeGraffenried. Dude's got 20 touchdowns. Like, are you kidding me? He had 20 touchdowns this year. So he probably needs a little more development, but if you got that guy that can make plays, you just got to find ways to get him on the field. And then we go to the North Carolina bag once again, like Ben Black, and we get Stephen Murray, who's a speedster like Ben Black, and Michael Thomas III out of Donovan Catholic. So this is, last year we talked about how last year's wide receiver group was going to be the best room that we've had in a while. This class can really turn out to be something special. So we'll see how that develops. Hopefully a couple of these guys can develop and fill some shoes. Left tackle we talked about, it's going to cost a lot in the portal. Again, maybe we go to a group of 5 team. Maybe we go to the MAC. Last year we got the guy with the best dance moves in collegiate football, and Shedrick Rhodes. He didn't get much playing time, but he did get. Probably one of my most viewed videos was a short of Shedrick Rhodes just like doing some dance on the field in the middle of the play. I don't know, got like 1,200 views or something. But he's going to have to dance around on the offensive line to make some plays. We're going to need to find a guy. I'm feeling Holland Pierce's shoes are some pretty big shoes to fill. It's going to cost a lot in the portal. My eyes are going to... I never thought that my eyes would be glued to the portal. But even though I have big issues with NIL, I've touched on this in the past. College football is now the NFL. It's not amateur athletics. Colleges are non-profit organizations, still have to figure out the revenue sharing. But I still don't like it. The investment that you make in these players through tuition, books, room and board, coaching, life contacts, travel, marketing that the universities and the leagues do for them, that's several $100,000 in investment without NIL. Nonetheless, I'm going to be glued to it starting on Monday, and it's going to be really interesting if we continue to go down the under-the-radar route where we find guys that are culture fits and not the big sexies, but we'll see how that goes. Another guy that might have to step in and play early is Jalen Matthews, also out of Tom Zivers, 6'7", 305. He might have to put on a couple lbs on that frame, put on a little bit of weight. But if he can step in and be that developmental guy that gets more and more reps, Todrick Hunt, I believe, feels that he can start at guard. Maybe you start him off that way. And then he moves into a left tackle spot. So, we have Felter, we have Zelinskas, Kobe Asamoah, Tyler Needham, tight end / offensive lineman. I'm in section 124, and his family sits right now. I think it's his family because they all have Tyler Needham jerseys. Nonetheless, I hope he rebounds and he contributes. He's a warrior. He's a fighter. And so the floor of this, unlike years in the past, the floor is pretty high. Will Taj White take the next step, be that left tackle? Dante Chin getting some good reps. We'll see how the offensive line fleshes out, but we can't take a step back. We got to continue to get depth. We have to find a guy that's going to fit in at left tackle. Running backs, we're kind of set with Kyle. Big thanks to him. He was a fighter, a warrior, played through injuries. Loved every time he got the ball. We'd be standing there yelling at the refs from the stands, don't blow the whistle, don't blow the whistle, because he's going to carry guys 2, 3, 4, 5 yards or more. And we're a real warrior. Going to miss him. Antoine Raymond seems to be the heir apparent. He's filling in pretty well. He has kind of some Kyle moments. Jay Sean Benjamin is that change of pace guy. Really, really, really rooting for Sam to make a comeback, get well from his injuries, and finish strong. I think overall the group, because you don't have that leader that you had in Kyle, both in the locker room, on the field, and with some fight. Not sure how that all is going to turn out. But we did get a late ad on signing day with Somerville's Terrell Mitchell. He took a big jump from his junior year to senior year. I think he only had 500 yards in his junior year and then had a big senior year. We flipped him from Wake Forest. Stylistically, he a lot of guys are saying he reminds them of Kyle. He's got that build, 5'9", 185 pounds. By the time he gets to be, a freshman at Rutgers, he'll probably be, 5'9", 185, 190. That's stocky, kind of built, loaded to go ground kind of guy. And hopefully he turns into something close to Kyle Monangai. And then at quarterback, people were kind of, I don't want to say scratching their heads, but they're like, Sean Ashenfelder, not a highly sought-after guy. I think he had some pretty good offer lists, maybe Pitt or West Virginia. Not terribly accurate. He was in the 50s. Did have a better year this past year, his senior year. But he's a dual-threat guy who's athletic and apparently can play Major League Baseball. And I think that's the kind of guy that they're looking for, a system fit behind A.J. Sarace. Because A.J. Sarace, essentially he's a right-handed, for the OGs out there, right-handed Steve Young. He's going to be a dual-threat quarterback who could run it and throw it, be athletic. So although Sean Ashenfelder isn't some super productive, stud quarterback who's going to be groomed to take over starting quarterback position, he's that guy that's going to, when A.J. Sarace is not in the lineup, you're not going to lose much because he has similar type of style and traits. But nonetheless, this recruiting class, very good, top 30. We're going to have to execute on the field, and young guys are going to have to, they're going to have to get some reps. Next year, my feeling, is going to be tougher schedule, both in conference and out of conference. And we have to be ready for that. So we need to build some depth, make sure that offensive line is healthy, intact, make sure we get some guys in the portal to fill safety, corner, left tackle, defensive line. The coaching staff really has their job cut out for them this offseason in finding guys in the portal that can plug holes on defense, because whereas last year we were like, oh, we have all these guys coming back, it's going to be great. Next year is like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have none of these guys left. So nonetheless, let's keep an eye on that. Everybody continue to have an outstanding holiday season. By the way, we're playing Ohio State in basketball. Ohio State's 5-3, 2 losses in a row. Lost at home, I think, to Pitt, and then they get obliterated by Maryland. Maryland's going to be a problem. They're 5.5-point favorites over Rutgers, and this is another, despite Ohio State being 5-3, it's going to be a problem. I haven't watched a lot of them, but they do like to shoot the three, and they're only around 36%, and most of that was from 2 or 3 games where they just were not hitting shots. If they're hitting shots at 40%, 3-point shots at 40%, we're going to have trouble. We know how we have issues defending the perimeter. Even if they're not hitting it at 40%, but they're raining them down and they hit enough of them, this is not a game that I feel good about, despite their 5-3 record, despite them losing 2 in a row, which actually might work in their favor. They're missing Aaron Bradshaw, their center. He was a transfer from Kentucky. He was one of the guys that Rutgers was looking at after Cliff left to potentially get into the program. 7-footer, 7'1", whatever he is. So even without him, I still think this is going to be problematic for us. Hopefully we can play some perimeter defense, hit our 3-point shots, be able to rebound, and defend the paint. Everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you the next time.